Welcome to On the Sidelines, the show that discusses sports and how sports intersects our lives. I'm your host, Paul McGrath, and I'm glad that you can join us for this show. The most integral part of our show are the stories that our guests have shared. Unfortunately, some of our guests are no longer with us. On the Sidelines would like to revisit some of our past shows with these guests as On the Sidelines remembers our guests. Let's start with our show that was recorded in December of 2019 with Worcester-born actor Paul D'Amato, who would exchange lines with Paul Newman in the iconic hockey movie Slapshot. Paul appeared with a real hockey goon, Doug the Thug Smith.
And the rest is history.
Well, let's see if you could act. We've got a scene here from Slapshot. We're not movie critics, but I think we can get a flavor and actually see you in the film. Here we go.
Hey, McCracken.
Dunlop, you suck.
All I can get.
$100 says you're gonna crack my skull, huh?
I wouldn't crack your knuckles for $100.
So he's bluffing.
Yeah, well, somebody's gonna kill you, you dumb son of a and it's not gonna be me.
There you have it. A lot of, especially women, would love to act with Paul Newman. You're in scene with Paul Newman.
It's my idol.
You're coming down. Based on research I have here, this movie was filmed in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, Hamilton, Utica, and Syracuse, New York. Where were you?
That was Johnstown, Pennsylvania.
That was Johnstown, Pennsylvania.
That was Johnstown, Pennsylvania. Yep. At the War Memorial Auditorium.
Both scenes, the Paul Newman and then on the ice.
Yep.
And because that was the script was written by a woman named Nancy Dowd. We'll see her later.
Yeah.
And her brother played for the Johnstown Chiefs back then.
Right.
So I think they might have been, the Johnstown Jets?
Oh, the Jets back then?
The real team.
The real team, yeah.
Jets.
Right.
So those scenes, let's take the first one with Paul Newman.
Yep.
And we'll do the second one. Do you remember how many takes it took? Especially when you're hitting into Michael Onke in there.
All right.
Are you good on first take?
The first one,
yeah.
No, the first one with the one that I said Dunlop.
Yeah, we understand. Yeah.
Okay. He was. First of all, it was in your spare time. It was Dunlop, in your spare time. Okay. And then they cut the in your spare time because it was redundant.
Yeah.
All right? Then that's, at least that's what George Roy Hill told me. The second one, okay, the first one was basically a gunfight.
Well, yeah, you're coming down, yeah.
That's what I was thinking. I was thinking a gunfight, and I'm gonna just shoot him. that was it. And the second one was the one with Ankeen. Oh,
Yeah.
and when I smashed him into the boards.
Right.
Yeah, well, that I had a rubber stick for that.
Oh,
I
really?
skated. Yeah. That was probably 13 or 14 takes. With the guys egging me on, screaming, "Hit him harder! Hit him harder!" And I'm like,
Well, they actually did play hockey for
Michael.
University of New Hampshire.
Michael was a great
Yeah,
hockey
right,
player.
yeah.
Michael was a good hockey player. Yeah, he played and Hanrahan.
Oh, is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, Hanrahan the goalie. Yeah, Mike played hockey, and I didn't want to leave my feet, because if you leave your feet, you lose. You lose.
Plus it's a penalty, yeah.
Yeah. So I kept one foot on the ground and smashed him as hard as I could, and with a rubber stick. And I'm sure you can see it bending, but you didn't see it there.
Well, how about the sword fights? Were those rubber sticks or those real sticks?
That was rubber sticks. Now with that was rubber sticks when we went to joust each other, and then it was balsa wood when he hit me. When George Roy Hill sat down and hit me.
That's the way it was.
And that's the way it was. Yeah.
And so how was Paul Newman? How was he off the set? Did you interact with him?
He was great. He was great. Let me tell you about Paul Newman. Paul Newman was. I found in that scene. You see where he sits up and says, "Go get him, killer."
Yeah.
And I listened to George Hill. I listened to him give Paul direction on that piece. And he said, "I need about 10 seconds of film here, and I need you to sit up and with a smile, and then say, 'Go get him, killer.'" And so, okay, so I watched that, and I watched that happen, and I watched Newman go get him, killer. Okay, so I had to wait, because I had to wait until dailies came in, and dailies didn't come in for another 2 days. So 2 days later, we're sitting in there, and I'm watching, and I'm watching, and oh my God, he did it. He did exactly what George Roy Hill asked him to do. And I found myself next to Newman, and I found myself saying, "That was a great moment." And then I realized, what are you doing? You're telling Paul Newman he had a great moment. And I said, "Sorry about that, Chief. I'm sorry." And I went over and I sat down, and I was like, "Oh God."
Funny.
All right. So the next night was the stick fight. And the next night was the stick fight, and so we brought these in, and I'm watching the stick fight, and I'm going, yeah, this is okay, yeah, this is good. I like this, and I find myself, someone's in my periphery, and it's Paul Newman, and I go, "What?" And he goes, "You're crazy." And I go, "Thank you."
And not to interrupt you, but I mean, those scenes,
Yeah.
you really do act and play like a crazy guy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
play
yeah,
well,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
obviously I'm not giving you a kick here, but
Yeah.
I mean, you know, your features.
Well, the
right?
facial
Your
expression- the facial
expressions.
expression,
You got the
yeah.
wide eyes,
Yep.
and you
Yep.
know, back then
He's
of course you
bugged
were
out.
younger,
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
and you certainly portray like a wild man. So
Yep.
that was the perfect character for you.
Yeah.
You really, well, you killed it. I mean, you were great.
Maybe he
Yeah.
was in characters.
But you know what I'm saying? I mean,
No,
I
it's
understand.
fantastic.
You know what? In looking back, absolutely.
Right.
But when I first came to George Hill, I said, what can I do with this role? You know? And he said, you can do anything you want.
Yeah, so he gave you a long
I went,
leash.
oh my
Yeah.
God, anything I want? He says, you can do anything you want. I go, okay,
Right.
thank you.
So if acting like a wild man, it comes natural to you,
Yeah.
well, you should have got an
Yeah.
Academy Award. because
Yeah.
You were,
Yeah.
that was incredible.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
And as a hockey player,
Yeah.
you know, if I saw you coming at me, I'd be like, oh my God, look at this guy.
Yeah,
He's out of his mind.
yeah, he's,
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was fantastic.
Yep. Well, it was part of the game.
Sure.
Part of the game.
So we've heard from Paul D'Amato in his movie life and the iconic hockey movie, Slapshot. But what did he do with that? Well, we have here a picture of my son Dave and Doug the Thug Smith along with Paul. Paul would go to various charity events and donate his Syracuse Bulldog hockey shirt for raffles to raise money for the various charity events. In one case at the auction that we had, it was raffled off, and a week or two later, Paul would come back to us to sign the shirt at a local watering hole. We did not have Paul buy the beers, but he was a good enough guy, and that's what he did. He came back, donated those jerseys, signed them to raise money for various charities. Paul would pass away on February 19th, 2024, at the age of 76. May he still be exchanging lines with Paul Newman. Ever wonder what it is like to be a professional sports photographer and cover a professional hockey team? In January 2019, Alan Sullivan joined us with then Westboro High School senior Sam Stuckey to fill us in on such an occupation. Here is how it all started. And Alan, let's start with you. Give us a little bit of background on yourself and then maybe how you got interested in photography, but maybe what you were even doing before that.
Yeah. No, I was always interested in photography, even as a youth growing up. I always liked cameras and taking pictures. And then at one point in the probably early 2000s, late 90s, I became friends with a real photographer who was with the Boston Herald. And it was always fun to pick up the paper and see his photos, sports-wise, of different players, Red Sox, Patriots, Bruins, because I was a sports nut my whole life, and see his pictures propagated on, the big newspapers. And it was really cool, and we became friends, and he transitioned me into pro-level gear to start out of the gate. So I was shooting with little point and clicks.
So did you ever take photography in high school
Never.
or college or
Nope.
no?
Never, just always an enthusiast.
And then you saw his picture and you said,
Yep.
"Geez, that looks like
Yep.
may interest you."
Exactly.
And of course, he probably had a byline on the photography on the picture.
Oh, it was-
so his name is right there.
Oh, man. Adam Vinatieri from the Patriots' first Super Bowl, jumping up and down in the back of the Herald, full-page spread, photo by Jim Mahoney.
So-
And it just was like, oh, that is so cool. He got to go to the Super Bowl, and he created this monumental historical image, because it's all about documentation, photography, and it just inspired me to just want to do stuff like that. And he got me going, gave me my first camera, real camera, which was a Nikon 1D with a 70 to 200 millimeter 2.8 lens.
He gave that to you.
I bought it.
Oh, you bought it. Okay.
But I got a good deal.
Got a good deal. Okay.
I got a good deal. And usually you don't want to buy from photojournalists because the cameras are beat to heck. But anyways, that's where I started with. And my first assignment through him, I kind of started with the Herald, just doing a little stringing. I wasn't an official employee, but he could send me out on little missions to take pictures for the paper. And my first one was Mick Jagger.
Oh, wow.
That was my first guy. He said, go to the Boston Ballet, hang out there. We know Mick Jagger's going to be there at some point to do a costume fitting. Just get a shot. And I got the shot 2 hours later, and the next day it was in the paper, and I got money for it. It was like wonderful.
Now, did you
need permission to get in there? Did you just like
Nope.
hang out like
It was like almost
a
like
paparazzi?
almost like paparazzi, but I was the only one there. They were the inside track of the Boston Herald.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Has a lot of moles, we'll say. They know people who know people, and they knew he was going to be there, and I just staked it out, and he got out of the limo and a couple clickies,
And that was it.
and made the paper. And once you get in the paper, they pay you, and it was nice.
Okay, there you have it on how we got into photography. Well, how about shooting a celebrity, a local celebrity, and then getting an autograph on that, and then telling us, well, how we really had to crop that picture?
Well, we'll go back and forth between technique and the photos. Let's start off with a photo that we can look at. That I think this is one that Alan took, and I think if you're a hockey fan, you know that this is Rene Rancourt of the Boston Bruins. And can you give us a little background on what you were doing here?
Rene served 40 years with the Boston Bruins as their national anthem singer. Basically, he's famed. That's one of his Stanley Cup rings on his finger, you can see. That was his last year at the Garden, which was last year. He retired from singing from the Garden last year. And that particular photo, I happened to be, he comes out by the Zamboni entrance,
Right.
walks out onto the
The
carpet.
ice resurfacing now.
Yes.
It's not even a
Oh,
Zamboni.
that's right.
anymore,
You're
right?
correct. Yep, they don't call them Zambonis.
Not a Zamboni.
Yeah,
ice
because it's a
resurfacing.
brand. Zamboni's actually the brand.
That's correct.
So I was at the face-off circle, which is just to the right of that resurfacing area entrance, and I got some nice close-ups, and I wanted to get him with the fist pump, with emotion, and luckily I captured the moment. I showed him that picture, and he invited me to his house
Oh, really? Yeah.
because he wanted the picture. He said this is he's been doing it for 40 years, so it was so cool that he actually said, this is one of the best pictures I've ever seen of me. And I'm like, wow, I was flabbergasted. So I went to his house, and the better part of the story is I went to his house in Natick, got to his door, I was walking up his driveway, he opened his doors up, and he started serenading me with the national anthem of Canada. He was singing "O Canada" to me as I was walking up his driveway. I wish I had a video cut of it, but, and he's a great guy.
Now, that's picture perfect. I mean, look at the cufflink. You got the B on the cufflink.
Yeah, oh, I
You've
didn't
got
even
the
see
ring, and
Good call.
he's given the pump. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
he always
No,
gets into
he
it.
does. He never failed.
Now, when you took that, was that in color or black and white? Or
Yeah.
that was color.
I've started to do a lot of black and white stuff lately, and people seem to like it. I add a little bit of, like that one I didn't enhance at all, but there's some of the ones that may be on here that have just a little bit of like a sharpening enhancement, which brings out a lot of detail. But that one I didn't need it really. It was pretty clean.
Now may I ask, any cropping or that's
Yeah.
what you took your crop?
Yeah,
right?
you shoot wide and then
Yeah.
crop to the best ability. That's the biggest thing I learned, is how to crop properly. That was one of the things I learned from a guy named Bruce Bennett, who basically is, Bruce Bennett.
He's the hockey photographer.
He's the hockey photographer.
He's the guru, yeah.
Yep, and I submitted a resume to him at one point, and, trying to get in with Getty Images, and he said, just watch your cropping. And I took that, lines. If I had a shot and the dasher board was like this,
Yeah.
I fixed it to that. Horizontal line, perfect lines. So your backgrounds, he always said, make sure they're level. The posts on the goal posts, make them 90 degrees and vertical, so there's no tilt. And that was one of the biggest things I learned about, shooting properly. I look back at my older stuff, and I see a lot of
Well, yeah.
dashers and boards like this. I'm like, ooh, that's.
Wait till we get
I
to a
would fix
couple of
that.
mine later in the show. Here. But,
Okay, Alan showed many pictures on that show, and afterwards, Sam Stuckey and I had a discussion on which one we liked the best, and we both agreed it would be the armpit shot. Well, let's take a look at the armpit shot.
all right, let's get to the one here that we're looking at, and this one is almost like shooting through a keyhole, but we're shooting through one of the players, I guess.
Yes. So 2 years ago, I saw this photo, and Jake DeBrusk is in on Jonathan Quick from the LA Kings. And the puck's in view, and it was literally through a player's armpit. And it was by luck, because there's no way you could frame that fast enough to see an open armpit and shoot through his armpit. So it was more, I think this was luck. After this, I started saying, you know, that's kind of cool. So I started searching for it when I noticed face-offs.
Yeah.
I'd wait for players to kind of just jostle their arms a little, and I'd put my focal point right through the armpit, and I started calling it the armpit shot, and I put a bunch of them on Instagram. So I have a bunch of these shots now with like faces and bodies, and they're hard to get because you don't get a lot of players just put their arms down.
Yeah.
But I called it the armpit shot, and I was hoping it'd take off, and it's just one of those things, you know, just one of those weird shots. You're like, oh my God, this framed out perfectly. And
Yeah, you see DeBrusk, Jonathan Quick, of course, Connecticut boy that went to the University of Massachusetts, so you have a local connection. The puck is right there.
Yep.
And that, I guess that's an unnamed Bruin player that we'll never know who it
Jake
is.
DeBrusk.
Oh, huh?
That's Jake DeBrusk.
Where?
To the right. See the black helmet?
Yeah, but I mean, who the?
Oh,
who,
that
who,
one.
who
Oh,
the
yeah,
player
that
is.
player, yes.
We'll
Sorry,
never,
you're right.
I mean, he gets
You're
no.
right. I have
he
no
gets
idea.
no credit.
No. Maybe if I checked the crop and what I did.
You'd have to know who's on the line.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
type
we
of
don't
thing.
get it with the armpit shots.
Unfortunately, Alan would pass away at the age of 56 on September 28th, 2021. Hopefully he's still up there clicking away, and maybe he knows whose armpit it is. Being a sports broadcaster is a dream job for many a young person. In June 2019, we were glad to have Eric Lindquist of the Worcester Railers join us along with Massachusetts Pirates broadcaster Mick Morninghalf. Eric talked about calling a game.
Railers, you're the Railer guy.
You know what? I look at it that at the end of the day, I have 20 sets of parents that are listening no matter what. And I'm talking about the players' parents.
Yeah, I
So
understand,
I want
yeah.
to make sure that at the end of the day that those 20 sets of parents, relatives, enjoy the game. You know, if one of the players makes a mistake, you know, I don't, you know, kind of dive into it knowing that, again, at the end of the day, yeah, it's professional hockey, but you know, they're young players, they have families, and I want to make sure that the families enjoy the broadcast. And that's usually, you know, that's where I start at. Once I get that out of the way, then I can do everything else. But I want to make sure that the families enjoy the broadcast and they feel good about their, you know, what their son did on the ice.
Eric talks about calling a game. Well, what about if it's on TV or if it's on radio? Is there a difference?
Especially in hockey, it's so fast.
Well, you know, I have a face for radio, so I prefer the radio. You know, I get to do a handful of TV games on Charter TV3, but I'm a radio broadcaster, and you know, a lot of the radio broadcasters want to get into TV, but I enjoy the craft of the play-by-play on radio. I think it's different. It's and it's old school, and in a way, hockey-wise, I'm old school and prefer the radio side.
Many a broadcaster have a signature call. Mick Morninghoff helped me with that question.
I don't know, nuances.
All right, I gotta ask. What's your call? You know, you always say that if it's a goal call, if it's what's your call?
You know
Your
what?
signature call. Everybody has one.
I think it's more of it's not necessarily a goal call, but on a fight, I do a ding, ding, ding after, which like a big fight. So I think maybe would be my call. But you know, there's some broadcasters that have they almost kind of they know what they're going to say before the game even starts, right? I like to wait until things unfolds. Like I don't use big words. I don't I don't have a long list of really fancy sayings or anything like that. I like to I dumb it down. And part of it is because I don't have a big vocabulary anyway. I went to college and all that, but I don't think you need to use big words to make things exciting or make yourself feel smart or whatever that is. It's again, at the end of the day, it's a cab driver listening to the game, or a regular person, and So I like to keep things simple.
But
Stupid.
You did Northeastern.
In minor league hockey, the broadcaster does more than just broadcast. Eric told us some of his other duties.
Right now, we're talking broadcasting. Massachusetts Pirates, Worcester Railers. Your title really isn't broadcaster. You're doing, I don't know how many hats you're wearing. You got one on now, but...
So this weekend alone, I was subleasing apartments where our players would live during. I've got an ad on Craigslist. My phone is blowing up of people that want to go and see the apartments, but you do a little bit of everything, and that's part of the job that I also like. I like to be busy, and it gets you, able to do a lot of different things. Some might not be glamorous, but it keeps you busy and it keeps you on your toes.
So who leases the apartments, the players or the team?
Well, so we have an apartment that we have for over the course of the year, but the players we're responsible for housing the players. So, but they're only here for 7 months. So I have 5 months of empty apartments that I need to find someone that wants a nice home in Worcester. Are you looking?
4 or 5 months.
Yeah. Well, 3 month leases.
Or 3 months.
Yeah. Give me a call, railershc.com. My phone number's right there if you're looking for an apartment. I got two left.
You got 2 left?
I do.
Yeah.
So nobody ever thinks of that as part of your job.
No.
I mean,
and, again, like the broadcasting part, I'd say is about maybe 2% of my job.
Yeah.
And what people don't realize a lot of the time is, the puck drops at 7 o'clock. I'm usually at the rink at 8:30 a.m. and making sure that the locker rooms, they get the stats downstairs for the coaches. A lot of prepping for the game, not necessarily on the broadcast side, but when you get 5,000-6,000 people coming in, there's a lot to do to get ready for when the doors open at 6. So a lot of the time, I'm running up to the broadcast booth, right for the pregame show at 6:30, dripping sweat. And a lot of the time, it's the only time I can relax. When, do you sit or you stand? I usually start kind of sitting for the pregame show because I'm so exhausted. And then you kind of build up and get excited. And, next thing you know, you're standing and, hooting and hollering. But it's a long day. A lot of the time, it's 14, 15 hours. And, we play Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And by the time Sunday gets around, this past year, I really felt my age for the first time. And, those Sunday games, by the end of it, I was exhausted. I'd go home and, get some takeout and hit the couch, a little Chinese food, and I was done.
well, you do the 3 and 3, and sometimes that 3 and 3 isn't all in Worcester.
No, there's a lot of travel back and forth too, and I've spent a lot of time on the bus over the years. So, but you learn that when you're on the bus, a lot of the time that's when I do a lot of my game prep. It's the one time where I'm not in the office. I don't have 10 or 12 other people trying to get at me. It's my alone time. I can really focus on preparing for a broadcast.
Yeah.
Okay, Eric, how about one more memorable story?
Came out the wrong way. But any memorable moment, good or bad, that you have from the memory box here?
There's every season. There's it generally a lot of it is stuff that happens off the ice. A road trip. When you're on a bus for 14 hours going to Wheeling, West Virginia. There's a lot of stories that get involved with that. Driving through the night. So. If we want to go for a beer, after this, I got loads of stories, I could fill you in on. But, there was a time going to St. John's, we're on a flight, and long story short, there was a huge storm. And I'm sitting next to our goaltender, Troy Grosnick, at the time, and it's, midnight, it's snowing hard, and the captain comes on and goes, "Ladies and gentlemen," and our flight had already been canceled 3 times. And he goes, we're going to be the last plane that's going to be able to fly in. However, if I don't like the approach, we're going to pull off in the last moment. So he goes, "Expect wild turbulence." And as soon as he said that, the plane just shook. And I'm holding Troy Grosnick's hand, like people are crying, praying to God. Like we thought we were going down. So, we're flying in, and, it is snowing out. I barely look out, and I can see the runway. and the pilot curved off at the last moment, didn't like the approach, so he got on and goes, "We're gonna try it one more time." The entire plane's like, "No way, no way!" Like, we were begging, like, "Do not do this again." So we ended up flying back to Halifax and spent the night there. But a lot of travel stories over the years.
But you're here.
I'm here. I'm here. I made it.
Unfortunately, Eric would pass away at the age of 43 on May 23rd, 22. But Mike Myers of the Worcester Railers was kind enough to give me this commemorative puck of Eric. I do not collect hockey pucks, but I am keeping this one. May Eric still be giving stories up above. Did you ever get to interview a Hall of Famer? On the Sidelines' first show, recorded in July 2018, was fortunate to have a racing car Hall of Famer, George Summers, as our guest. We started off hearing about George being involved in a racing accident a week before his wedding.
I made money later on in life when I drove for other people. I used to get 40% of what I made.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
And I did very well at, the last 20 years that I raced. But the first 10 years was all experience.
Oh.
And the last, but I had some times off in there too, back here at Westboro, I got married in '56. And a week before my wedding, I had won a couple of weeks in a row.
In Westboro?
In Westboro.
You won in
yeah.
Westboro, yeah.
And I was leading the race, and there was a lap car there, and I went to the outside of the lap car. And the guy that was running second, he went to the inside. And the fella seen him, and he didn't see me, and he turned to give him room. And my rear wheel went over his front wheel, and I went end for end and broke my shoulder, broke my collarbone. So I ended up in the hospital. And
This is a week before your wedding.
week before my wedding, yeah. So it's up to Thursday now, right? And my mother's in the hospital, and my future wife, and I said, "Gee, we got to postpone this thing. I'm in a cast from my neck down to here, and my arm is up like I got a brace from here down to here." My mother says, "Can you walk?" I said, "Yeah, I can walk." "If you can walk, buddy, you're going down that aisle." So that's the way I got married, with my arm in a sling like that. 62 years been married now.
Oh, God love.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, George, well, how competitive are you and your fellow race car drivers?
So I'll get him, Well, he drove his heart out, and I drove my heart out, but I never did get him. And I finished second. Well, when I come in, Ken Curley said, "What is the matter with you? How
let him
did you
go,
do that? What are you thinking about?" I said, "Hey, if I got to win races by putting somebody out, I don't want to win races that way."
Yeah.
Today they do it.
that's the way they go.
That's the way they do it.
But it almost sounds like, George, because I know you golf. I've seen you golf. If I gave you a nickname, it would be down the middle George. But it seems like you equate it to golf, that you know all the guys, you enjoy the guys,
I love it.
but you're out to win.
Oh,
You're out to win.
Oh, I love to win. That's what my wife said. He gloats when he wins, and he pouts when he loses.
Well, George is a Hall of Fame race car driver, but he also had a father that was very famous, a major league umpire.
And we're going to shift gears, to use a pun here. We're going to go to baseball. Now, I'm going to go back to September 28th, 1955. The Yankees and Dodgers were in the World Series. And believe it or not, that's the last year, 1955, that World Series games played in September. Now they play them in November. Christ, they'll be playing them in December, for crying out loud. But at any rate, first game, Yankees-Dodgers, which was a big rivalry. Talk about rivalries in those days. And we're going to show a clip. We got Whitey Ford pitching. Whitey goes into the Hall of Fame. We got Yogi Berra catching. He goes into the Hall of Fame. We got Jackie Robinson on third base. He goes into the Hall of Fame. And if we can show the clip, let's see what happens here in September 28th, 1955, first game of the World Series.
With pinch batter Frank Keller at bat. Robinson dashes to the plate. It's close, and umpire Summers calls him safe on the daring maneuver. But Yogi Berra doesn't think so. And the fans will never forget the sight of Jackie Robinson hurrying for the plate on his daring steed.
Well, you may have heard there, the umpire, it said umpire Summers. Umpire Summers was William Reed Summers.
Yes.
Your father was born in 1895, passed away in 1966, and he was an umpire from 1933 to 1959. And he became an umpire in 1933. I didn't know this, but they used to have 2 umpires in a game. And in 1933, they went to 3 umpires. So it helped get more umpires into the league. Your father would umpire in 8 World Series, 7 All-Star games. He was in the 1948 playoff series, the Red Sox against the Indians. So he started in 1933. You were born in 1935.
Yeah.
So as a child and as a young man, you probably didn't see your father too much. What was it like having a father that was an umpire in the American League?
All I can remember as a young kid, they didn't fly on airplanes, but it was a big deal to go to Worcester and see that train come in. I used to get the biggest kick out of watching that train come in with that big arm going back and forth. Yeah. And my father was a down-to-earth guy, and he used to hang around with the regular fellas from Upton, you know, and he'd sit on the common with them, and they'd talk, and he'd tell baseball stories and this and that. But before my father was coming home, my mother used to say, "Your father will be home next week. Your father will be home next week," scaring us kids to death. There was 8 of us. I was the youngest of 8.
You were the youngest of 8?
The youngest of 8, yeah. And I heard my father tell the guys on the common there one day, "Mary Ellen's got those kids scared to death of me coming home. I'm supposed to come home and beat the crap out of them and then take them to White City."
Well, people might not remember White City, but it was an amusement park on
Yes, it was.
right on Lake Winsigamen, the Shrewsbury side of Lake Winsigamen that went into Worcester, and it was a great place. Kids loved to go to White City. That was a treat in those days.
You know, something I got to tell you about that.
Yeah.
My father umpired that World Series,
Right.
and he got a World Series ring for it.
Was that right? Yeah.
Oh, beautiful. He got 2 of them, one for my mother and one for him.
Yeah.
And he wore that ring all the time. And when he passed away, my mother gave that ring to me. And I wore that ring like the weddings and just special things.
Special
you know.
occasions, yeah.
But no matter where I went, people would say, "God, could I look at that ring? Do you mind if I looked at that ring?" That ring was gorgeous, you know. Well, do you know, one year we went to Florida and some kids broke into my house and stole that ring and never got it back.
Never got it back.
Never got it back.
On the Sidelines is not into getting scoops, but George made me feel like I was a scoop reporter here.
Well, it's not out yet, but I can say it because it's going to happen. But in Florida, in Daytona Beach, Florida, they have a big museum down there, and they call it the Living Legends, and it's been going on for 26 years, and all Southern guys have always gone into this thing. Well, my wife and I were driving in the car here about a month ago, and I got a telephone call. I picked it up, and I don't hear the best. And I'm listening, and I'm listening. I said, "Excuse me, Vic, can I put my wife on to talk to you so that I know for sure what you're talking about?" So my wife gets on the phone. Yes, yeah, and she's talking. She says, "Did you understand?" I said, "I didn't understand the whole thing." She said, "You have been voted into the Living Legends in Daytona Beach, Florida, and you're going to be put in February of next year."
19.
February night is 3 days before the Daytona 500, and about 400 or 500 people go to that. You know, I've been to it a few times, but I'm going to be inducted this year into the Living Legends of auto racing in Daytona Beach, Florida.
Well, congratulations,
Isn't that
George.
something, huh?
This is the first.
That hasn't happened yet. It hasn't even been out yet, but
Well, that's on a.
They wouldn't have called me and told me if I wasn't going to be in it, I guess. You know.
They can't renege.
That was George to be inducted into the Wall of Fame in February of 2019. Unfortunately, George would pass away on January 4th, 2019. And it was a cold, cold January day when we all waited 3 hours in line at Dave Pickering's funeral home in Upton to pay our respects. And what was playing on the monitors in the funeral home but our interview with George. And when I got to the family, who I did not know, they all knew me and thanked me for doing the show and for hearing George's stories, which they've heard 100 times, but now they still had him telling the stories. On the Sidelines is proud and honored to have had these guests tell their stories. As we all meander down the road of life, may I suggest that you consider documenting some of your stories, whether by video, in writing, or some other method. For the most important stories for you and your family are your stories. This is Paul McGrath saying thanks for watching On the Sidelines, and I hope to see you at the game. And if you're not in the game, I hope to see you on the sidelines.